everyone, and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Alexia, and I am the project and event manager of the Microsoft Reactor Toronto. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat. Before we begin, I would like to quickly review two items with you, our code of conduct and event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. And secondly, our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 48 to 72 hours. I will share the link to our channel in the chat. And if you've not been on a live stream through YouTube before, please note that you must create an account on YouTube in order to access or interact in the chat. You can set that up now. And if you're unable to use the chat but have questions, please feel free to reach out to us through social media or on Meetup. Which brings us to today's session. I'm going to bring in our speaker here. Hi there, Minjun, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet all of you, and I'm super excited to talk about these topics.
Totally, we're so excited to have you there also. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and yeah, take it away. I feel you can share
I can
your
share
screen
my
now.
screen.
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
Cool. Share the screens.
Fantastic.
Can you guys see my full screen here?
Yeah, we can now.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Minjun Chen, and I'm currently a product designer working at Microsoft. So today I want to talk about how to design your design career through some of the lessons and key takeaway I learned from my own journey. At the very beginning, I want to say all these kind of opinions and journey I share in the rest of the presentations are my own personal experience. They are not representative of any of my employers. And during this presentation, I will share my authentic journey and thoughts and all these kind of lessons along the way. So here is the agenda for this presentation today. First of all, I will talk about my journey, how I get into UX and product design. And then I will talk about what is my own design process to design my design career. Along with this design process, I will share 3 stories about how I applied my own design process to land my first job, to growing my product design skill set, as well as getting into larger tech company. And after this presentation, we have some minutes left, so we can leave some room for the audience, and I can answer some of your questions after this talk. So let's start with my journey. When I was a little girl, I really loved drawing, and I always thinking about maybe I can become a painter, artist, or a designer in the future. And to becoming a product designer or a designer, my younger self didn't know that the journeys took me 10 plus years. And in order to reach this goal, I end up with studying for 3 different majors. So in the first place, I attend the school in China. So I studied Chinese literature and language in my college. And then in 2015, I go to University of Pennsylvania to study learning science and technology at their educational school. And then finally, I got the admission from University of Washington, Seattle. And finally, I became the student who studying human-computer interaction design, which is the UX design at UW. So during my time at UW, I start learning what is UX design, product design, and how what is the research process look like, and start to build up my student portfolio around the UX design projects. And after my graduations, I finally looking for my very first job. And in the very beginning, I moved from Seattle to Boston for my first job, and I was working at College Wine, which is an early stage startup company that help the high school student looking for the mentorship from the college student when high school student they are applying for this school. And I was the designer there, working for their internal product and also building the platform for the college advisors to provide the self-service to our high school student. And then I moved to a larger company like Wayfair, which is e-commerce company for all these kind of home goods. And I was very lucky enough for to working on this very comprehensive and difficult logistics system, which is the warehouse design team. And I got a lot of opportunity to fly to the warehouse and do the on-site user research, talk to these warehouse associates, warehouse supervisor, and build up tons of the experience at my time at Wayfair. And during the pandemic, I got a job at Amazon. So I moved back to Seattle. During my time at Amazon, I was working at Amazon Prime, where I was designing the experience for our global Prime member to discover different benefits under their Prime membership. And then right now, like I start my job at Microsoft. And during my time here at Microsoft, I was working on the Bing search, where I'm designing the experience to help our customer search image and video on the Bing search engines. So this is my like brief like journey, and I will also talk about like how I get into what I am using my own design process. So let's start with what is my design process to design my career. The first thing is defines. So in the every stage of my journeys, I always ask myself what I want and what I'm good at and what is the gap. So because by knowing all these kind of questions, I can better understand about like what I want and what is the gap between them and how I close my gap through the specific action, which take me to the second stage. It is the design process. So under the design step, there's a couple things that I think about how I can take specific measurable action and how I can leverage the resource internally and externally. And then it is also on the process of reflection and iteration. So I go through, so after I design all these steps. And then the purpose of this design is always about closing the gap I identify in the first step. And the last thing is the deliver. For the deliver step, not only is a play like where I will reach my goal and have a successful outcome, but also more important than that, I always trying to like document my thoughts, my learning, and some of the mistake I learned and how I can be better next time. And as we are the designer, we all know about like this is not after I deliver my result, that is not the end of our project, our own journey. It's always be an iterative process. So after I deliver the result, I start to set up a new goal for myself. So what I want to be next, and what I'm already improved, what I'm super skilled at right now, and what I want to go for next, and what is the gap. So I start like, so this is kind of the loop during my whole entire design process, from applying to this UX design school, then in my first job, getting into larger company and get promoted and level up my skill set as a product designer. So based on this, on my own design process and principle, I will share three specific story about how I use these three three steps to grow my career. And the first one is how I land my first job. So when I was in the school, I never have any like UX or product design direct internship experience because my master program was 1 year, which means after a years of the study, I will directly like go outside of the school and find and then my first job, which was super stressful for me in the very beginning. So here is the step I'm taking to land my first job. So I write down what I want, what I'm good at, and what is the gap. The first thing is what I want. So I want to land my first job in any of the tech company, like either the startup, like medium size or larger company within the 3 months. I always set up a like measurable and the time rounded goal for myself because I know about like what kind of thing I should do every day based on this high level goal. And what I'm good at, because I'm thinking is since I got my master degree from the UW, so I have a pretty great UX and SCI background, and I have plenty of relevant UX design project from my school. And what is the gap? Early on, the gap I feel like is a huge gap for me to land the first job. So the gap includes I don't have any resume and portfolio, and I have zero like UX experience, and also like I'm an international student, so there's also a language barriers for me to break into the industries and become more confident when I speaking and talking to this high manager in like English in the language that is not my like mother language. So I feel very very stressed out. So by identifying the gap, I start to think about what is the specific actions I can take to close each of the gap. So the first thing I will be talking about is how I close the gap for non like resume and portfolio. The first thing I'm thinking about is before I graduate from the school, I need to have like very first drive of my resume and online portfolio because with the resume and portfolio, I can start applying for the job after graduation. And when I was working on my first resume and portfolio, I also asked the feedback from my school alumni from the UDA program because a lot of them already working in this like tech company for a few years. I also leverage like the LinkedIn and trying to find some designer at this larger company where I'm dreaming of and looking for their feedback on my portfolio and resume. And then, like, because I have a lot of conversations with these people, I start to know about like which part I need to revise and update. So this is the iteration process for me to iterate resume and online portfolio again and again. And from my conversation with the school alumni, I kind of know about the importance of getting a portfolio presentation. So at the same time, after I building up my very first like online portfolio, I also start to putting two of my projects together into a portfolio presentation. And the second part is how I close the gap to being non-experienced for the job interview to become more skilled at the job interview. The first thing I'm doing is I always like just practice with my peer and the mentor. Especially, I feel like a lot of time having a mentor or like talking to any industry profession is very crucial to get this kind of critical feedback for my online portfolio, like portfolio presentations. And also I practice on my own. Early on, I wasn't very confident about my portfolio presentation. So I literally just wrote down every sentence for my entire presentation slides. And I just read the script again and again. And at the same time, I also focusing on like what is the transition sentence between each slide. So at least like logically, it makes much more sense if I focusing on the transition sentence. And the other thing is I always like just practice is through the real interview, because what I will going to say in the next slide is I did apply for tons like of the job applications every day, which means I got tons of interview. Um, Sometimes just from very very like small like early stage massive like startup company, but I still want to take this opportunity to practice my interview skill with this hiring manager. The last thing I think is very important, but a lot of people they don't take this action is document the interview questions and prepare for the answers in advance. I think this is a super important action for the student or younger designer who are looking for their very first job out of the school. It took time, but it worked really well during the interview. And last thing I want to talk about is how I close the gap between for the language barriers. So again, like sorry, there's a repeat slide. So again, like the action I take is just practice with my mentor and mentee, and practice it with the real interview. And I also like one of the other action I didn't list out here is I apply to at least 20 to 30 like companies every day uh, before I graduate and during and after my graduation, these kind of 2 or 3 months time periods. So I get thousands of the job the job application, and eventually I will get some of the initial round of the interview. So I always use this chance to practice my English and become more confident in speaking in English environment. So by taking on these actions, what kind of like tool or resource I'm leveraging in this process? So I always looking for and leveraging the resource internally and externally. For instance, like attending the UX design master programs gave me a lot of chance to do the networking with the school alumni who already become the designer working at Microsoft, Google, Amazon. So I got a lot of help and support from my school alumni. The second is uh, early on, I also reached out to this designer on LinkedIn, and I sent a lot of message, but I didn't expect all of them will reply to my message. But if one or two people they replies, you can leverage that chance to grab a coffee chat and looking for the feedback from them on your resume and portfolio. And the other thing is right now we have more like mentorship platform you can leverage to find the senior designer to provide the design mentorship to you. The last couple thing is for the portfolio and the resume, I'm using the Bestfolio a lot to find the specific like resume or portfolio from some company, because they have a really good category for different companies like designers portfolio. I'm also looking for some like video article talking about like how to prepare for your job interview, UX job interview on Medium and YouTube. And then the last thing is I also like read some books about the product design, like interview early on. So when I taking all this action and leveraging the resource, is always very important for me to reflect on what worked well and what didn't work well, and iterate through the process. And eventually, I can deliver the results. So in the first one, how I reach my goal is when I start my job hunting early on, I try to think about like what kind of the goal, like beyond the specific goal of the landing my first job. The first one is I design and iterate 5 versions of presentation, and I can see the huge improvements from the first one and to the final presentation I did. The second is I complete the 6 on-site interview and successfully land 2 job offer at the end. And the most important part is I landed my first job at a startup company within the 3 months after graduation. So after like I document the goal here, I also think about like what kind of lessons, mistake, or what thing I can improve next time. During my maybe the next job interview in 2 or 3 in 1 or 2 years. So I think this is the most important part in my journey is I always like taking the note and reflect on myself. Like you don't have to write down a formal like article about your reflection. It's just a personal note to remind yourself about what mistake you made and what I'm good at, what I should be improved, and what this company they are caring about when they are hiring the designer. So here is just a couple of the quick notes I wrote down for my first job hunting experience. The first one, which have a huge impact on my later like job hunting experience. The first one is after I get one on-site interview with a large company, the feedback I got from the hiring team was I didn't have enough collaboration experience. Through my presentation was great, but they didn't know about how I can collaborate with the engineer and PM during this kind of work environment because both of two projects I was presenting during the interview was my school project. So I didn't know about like how to like work with cross-functional team and handle the conflict. And the second one is like after we get into the interview process, the portfolio presentation is way more important than the resume and online portfolio itself because the way how you craft your story and how you present yourself is very like straightforward and important, critical during the interview process. So later on, when I start the job hunting again, I start to like put more time on crafting the visual design and the story and the structure for my portfolio presentation. And the other thing I learned is based on my couple conversation with the hiring manager and the senior designer, a lot of time when they are hiring for the junior designer, they are not just looking for like you should have like perfect product design skill. This is not realistic. However, the hiring manager they are looking for the younger or junior designer who who are very curious, who love to ask questions, who are willing to learn and grow, and who are humble enough, and are who have this kind of self-awareness to know about their strengths and what is their weakness. On the other like mistake I reflect on the process is because I just graduated from the school at that time. I was really dig into the HCD process, which is human-centered design process, during my portfolio presentation. So I go straight from like I did the research, here's the insight, and then I have a list of like wireframe and I draw the user flow. However, this is not the story they are looking for the portfolio presentation because they are more looking for like, here is the challenge and I am the hero, how I overcame the challenge and then the result. So I start to realize that here is a two-part. I didn't do really well in my first like job hunting experience, which is the collaboration. The other one is the storytelling. For the collaboration, is kind of the problem easy to solve because after I start working at this company, I naturally got the experience working directly with the product manager and engineer. The second one for the storytelling, I need to put more efforts to grow this specific presentation and story skill um, externally and internally. So the second story I will share is also based on these two insights I learned from my first job hunting is how I can grow my product design skill set when I was doing the job at work. So I start doing this process again. The first step is define what I want what I'm good at and what is the gap. So I start to write down like some very, very like like high level goal for myself. What I want is I want to grow my skill. I want to grow my soft skill, which are separate into two buckets. One is how I can improve my public speaking and storytelling. The second one is how I can like become more comfortable like working with the PM and engineer out of the school. And what I'm good at is I realize that I have a very solid foundation in UX design, visual design, and research, which and I was also new to the field, so I can bring all this kind of fresh idea and insight into the team. And what is the gap here is because I just graduated from the school at that time, there's no like experience for me to working with the PM engineer, and I didn't know about like how I can present my work, how I can handle the disagreement and the conflict with these people. And the other thing is like because I was an international student, so I wasn't very confident to speak internally or externally. I was afraid of public speaking. So because of this the time constraint for these talks, here I will focusing on how I close the gap for becoming more confident about the storytelling and public speaking, how I can improve my presentation skill during my job early on. So this is the specific step I'm taking to help myself become more confident, like speaking with different audience. So there are two parts we can think about doing a job. One is when we are doing a job, how I can leverage the resource internally. The first step I took was I scheduled the one-on-one with my manager, and I will let her know about this goal. I will talk directly to my manager about, so this is the opportunity areas. I wasn't very confident about like public speaking, and I want to have more chance to present my work to the team, to the design team, to the stakeholder, and the larger and different audience. So from there, my manager and I, we can discuss and work together to find this different opportunity. So it's kind of like setting up the goal, and the manager will also find this opportunity to help you reach this goal. So based on my conversation with my design manager, we set up a couple of specific action items. The first thing is I need to present my design work weekly to our internal design team, because we have an internal like weekly design team meeting every week. And the second is after I become more like comfortable about presenting my works, I start leading the weekly design review, where I was going to present my work with the PM and engineer, so I can got the feedback from my stakeholder. And after I'm doing like leading the design review with the PM engineer for a while, I feel like personally I become more confident and I know about how to better answer their questions. My manager also helped me to find an opportunity where I can present my design work, design project during the larger like all hands meetings. So I will speak to a larger audience within my company beyond my own team. And the other actions you can think about is when you are doing a job, you want to improve the public speaking and storytelling. What else I can do outside my job? So here's a few specific action I was taking. The first one is I watch tons of the talk on YouTube or on any other like video platform, and by watching them, I can learn about what kind of like storytelling or presentation technique they learned, and when they were using during their talks. So by doing that, I start just taking my own notes on any of the notebooks or digital app, so I can focusing on like maybe like what is the better like transition slides or sentence, like what kind of visual design they are using to design their presentation and what kind of structure they have for their presentation. So I start to summarize the insights after I watching these videos, the talk video. And then, so I think the best thing is like learning by doing. So after I have a few of the insights in my mind, I start looking for the opportunity where I can give a short presentation, a very like 5 or 10 minute presentation, like externally to the audience I never meet before. And during this process, there is also a few of the resources I was leveraging. First of all, like LinkedIn. And then like second is the mentoring platform where I talk about, I always love to listen about how other designers improve their presentation skill outside or inside their works. So I get some insight from them. And local design meetup groups. So I was reaching out to the Boston lady like UX during that time when I was working in Boston. So I got some chance to to give like 5 minute very short presentation to the local designer in person. And I also watch a lot of like YouTube video and also watching this like company like video from Apple, like WWDC and Google I/O, because they have tons of great presentation about introducing their products and what kind of like feature they have. This is all these things I can leverage to my own design review and job interview later. The last thing is, because this is the areas I want to focus on, so I will just search and read the books and online course specifically about the storytelling. And again, this is a process always with a lot of reflection and iteration. I always just revise and set up a specific, like iterate my specific action when I'm doing this activity. And the last thing about like deliveries. So obviously, like after this practice, I become more like confident. I present my works to the design team weekly. And then I start leading the weekly design review with the cross-functional team. And I gave one presentation to ladies at UX Boston during that time. And I was also very proud of like being a junior designer in my very first company. I gave one project presentation during the company-wide all hands meeting. So the other thing is, again, for the delivery, the result is always very useful for us to think about what kind of lessons, what kind of mistake, what kind of like personal thoughts I have along this journey. So what I learned here is I kind of know about 3 is the magical number for storytelling, because if we talk too much thing, like 5 or 6 or 7 example, people will become tired of your story, even though it's a good story, but we don't have the patience to listening continuously to listen to your story. The second is every time after I complete a design project, I start to document the most like challenging or most happiest moments after each project, because I think all these kinds of moments become a story where I can share later on during my future interview or cropping the story for my own case study. The other thing is I start to learn more about the technique about how I can receive like feedback from audience, from my peer designer, from the cross-functional partners. So every time when I'm presenting to this audience, I always become more specifically about how I can, what kind of feedback or what type of feedback I'm looking for from this review. And the other thing is, by doing a lot of like weekly design check-in review with my stakeholder, I start knowing that from the PM side, they're always looking for how did you incorporate the business requirement into the design. And from the engineering side, they are more think about what is the feasibility and any of the technical limitation, technical constraint for the design work you just create. And lastly, I think for the delivery side, I become more and more confident in presenting my design works with different group of audience. And the last story I want to share is getting into how I get into the larger company using the same design process. So when I switch in a job from company A to company B, it's really important for us to do the research about what kind of skill set or what kind of specific job requirement the company B they are looking for. The first one is from the hard skill side. They are looking for, like, as a designer, are you good at interaction design, visual design, and product thinking? And on the other side, the soft skill, they are looking for collaboration, communication, and the self-awareness. So based on these like 6 buckets of the skill set, I start to define my goal and the gap again. So based on this like framework, I start to write down my goal, what I'm good at, what is my superpower, and what is the gap, and then how I can close the gap. So the first thing is I talk to myself, I need to land a job at the company B within the 4 months. And what I'm really good at is interaction design, visual design. And because of my previous job experience, I have a diversity of the work project I can present and share with the hiring team. And what is the gap is like I don't have like an updated portfolio and presentation. And I'm not really skilled at handling the behavior question, because early on I didn't have enough like work experience, so I didn't know about how to answer this behavior question. And because of today's like talk time constraint, I will be focusing on what I'm doing to close the gap about handling this behavior question. So here is a couple like step I'm taking is, before I get into the job interview, here are a couple of things I was doing. The first one, I start to like quickly just search for how to prepare and answer behavior questions on YouTube and video on the media article and the YouTube video. So by doing that, just quickly browsing and just reading about what they are saying and listening to what they are talking about, preparing for the behavior question. And then I start to summarize the key insights and lessons I learned from this resource. And then the other thing I'm also doing is, it's really depending on what kind of company you are going to interview. We should do our own research about their expectation and what is the mission for this different company, because all these kind of behavior questions they are going to ask during the interview are very like aligned with their like company-wide missions. Especially like, for example, for Amazon, like they have a like the leadership principle. So that you have to prepare the example for each of the leadership this principle, because during their behavior question interview, they will ask each of the behavior question based on each of the leadership principle. And the other thing is, because of my previous interview experience and I doing my online research, I start to just write down at least 2 examples for each category for my behavior question. For example, like I have a bucket for how I can handling the conflict with my PM. So I write down 2 examples for them, and how I can handle the feedback with my manager or with my design team. I also write down the 2 examples for this bucket. So I think the best way for me to start on is just write everything down so I can iterate on that. The other thing I think make me feel more confident later to answer this behavior question is, I start building up my own library for the behavior question. And all these kind of behavior question I have in my own library is coming from my experience, my real like job interview experience. So the other specific action to closing the gap about answering this behavior question is during and after your job interview is a perfect time for us to document right away what is the most difficult and what is the very new behavior question you have ever encountered during this interview. And then I will just update my library with this new behavior question. And because some of the behavior question is really hard for me to answer during the interview, I wrote up my example first, and I share with my mentor and looking for the feedback from my mentor. Like, is there any red flags I have from my example, and what is their thoughts on answering this type of behavior question? And also, like after so this is so I also realized that how I introduce myself during the presentation or during the job interview is also very important. So I start to craft my introduction with intentionality that align with the company mission. And again, I write it down about my introduction so I can iterate my story using my written documents. And the last thing I was doing is eventually my goal was get into the larger company. However, because I applied tons of the company, so I also using the chance to text my updated version through this real interview with the company I didn't want to go. So I think it's a perfect time for me to just doing this kind of quick user testing and practice my interview skill and then become more comfortable when I speaking with the hiring team during this real interview. The last thing is like during this process, I also leverage the resource. It's all like online resource we have, like LinkedIn, Medium, YouTube, and any kind of available books about the job hunting and answering the behavior questions. And again, I always highlight it's really important for us to reflect on each round of interview, each step, and iterate your approach and your specific actions after the interview. And the result, when I deliver the result for this round of the job hunting, first thing I was very, very proud of that. I built up a comprehensive library for my behavior question, which I can not just using during that round of interview, but also I can use it for my future interview. And then I landed my dream job, and I became more confident about the job interview and answering this question. And last bonus is because I have more experience about the job interview answering this behavior question, I start to share my lessons to my mentee and my friend. And the last thing is, again, documenting your thoughts, lessons, and mistakes. I think this is the most important part for me to elevate my design career during this process. So after I do a lot of interview and realize this is very important, like for the behavior question, it's all about like handling the conflict and the disagreements. And the second is cropping my own narratives into different, based on different companies' mission, based on different teams' requirement is really important. I always share these metaphors to my friends or to my mentees. We already have the ingredients because we already created this project, did the job. And the rest of the job interview is about we are the cooker, how we can cook, how we can bring this ingredient and cook a meal and share it with the hiring team. So crafting your own narrative is very important during the job interview. The last thing is a lot of time when the hiring manager or any people, they ask these follow-up questions during the interview, there's no like right or wrong answer for it. It's all about like how you can justify your design decision and how you are confident to talk with people during the interview. Because when you are doing a job, you have a lot of opportunity to speak with not just your own team, but also presenting your design work with senior leadership. So as a designer, we should be very confident about our work and about our job. And at the end of this presentation, I also have some closing thoughts about designing my design journey and careers. So definitely it's not a very easy process for me and for most of the people. And it's a journey that's filled with a lot of like rejections, obstacle, and challenge. And mentally, like we also have, for me, like I also just cry a lot of tears, struggle, and fear along the way. But what I want to say at the end is just be patient and be persistent. Just iterate and always reflect on what you should improve, what you should be focusing on next, and be confident about yourself because it's a journey about like your own. It's not a destination. It's not about I should go into this company or I should be promoted into senior designer. It's a journey with a lot of fulfillment, enrichment, and happiness. And thank you so much for all of your listening, and hope this presentation help you when you are thinking about your design journey and design career. And for the rest of time, I can answer some of your questions from our chat. Thank you. Let me start sharing my screen so I can see the audience question. Okay. Let me see. So so let's jump into the question. I see the first question is, are there any course from Microsoft to learn and break into the UX field? I'm not quite sure yet, but I know about like from the Microsoft design team, we have a public like Microsoft design like Medium account, and we also have a web page talk about like Microsoft inclusion design and accessibility. And if you're interested in this part, you can search it directly on Google or Bing for this Microsoft design resource. Let me see. The second question is, how can someone with the past experience and startup company and let leverage the experience to land a job at a larger organization that has stronger design team and process? Okay, that is a great question. And this is the question I think I kind of mentioned a little bit during my presentation, because early on I was also struggling with how I can like work in a larger company from a startup background. So in general, like based on my own experience, the larger company, they are more looking for the designer who are more like rounded, like who have a rounded skill set, but we should be very strong, very good at like two skill set. For example, like I mentioned in my presentation, there are two parts of the skills that I'm looking for. One is the hard skill, which include the visual design, interaction design, and product thinking. The other thing is for the soft skill, they really looking for like great presentation, great communication, collaboration, and self-awareness. So if you are the designer working at the startup, trying to think about like from these three categories, what are the two things you are really good at, and leverage and show this kind of skill during the interview. And the second is from this, based on these six category, is there anything like you are not really good at? What is your opportunity areas here? So for me, during that time, I wasn't have enough collaboration experience, and I was not very confident about presentation. So I working really hard to improve these two skill set. So after I'm doing it for years, I can say I can see myself become more like the well-rounded designer. There's no like there is no like very visible like weakness from this six bucket. However, I have two very good skill, which is interaction design and visual design, to help me stand out and land a job in a larger company. So the third question is, as a junior designer, do you think it is better or easier even to get a job with a startup where you are the only designer, or a larger company with a team of designers? Okay, that is another great question. I can only speak based on my own experience. So like there's always be the pros and the cons, like being a like single designer in a startup or becoming a designer working in a larger company. So for the good sides for you as a junior designer to working in a startup as a solo designer, is you can speak directly to the CEO and the founder of the startup, and you will be get more chance to working on a diversity of the project. Basically, you will do everything, a diversity of the project because you will take more responsibility. But the, but but something that doesn't work really well because you are the only designer, and I assume there's no like higher level like design manager or senior designer on the team. As a junior, like sometimes like we will get lost during this process. We didn't know about like we don't know about what kind of feedback, like who is the best person for me to reach out to get this design feedback to enhance our craft at the startup. And the second is like because like when we are working on a diversity of the project, you are not dig into a specific project areas. Maybe sometimes that you feel like it's very rushed to complete one project and there's no like user research or usability testing during the process. Because for the job interview, like they always ask you some follow-up question about how did you explore the design, how did you iterate during the process. So you need to think about the design decision like more carefully and with intentionality. And the good thing for working at larger company is because you always have a design manager, a team of more senior designer who can support you to grow. And the second is because for in the larger company, like different level of the designer, our scope of the works is different. And for most of the junior designer, they won't be taking too many projects, and they will in the very beginning they will be helping the senior designer to working on a specific part of the product. So by doing that, like you will be more familiar with about the process and being more confident about presenting your design work with your senior designer, with the design team, and then overall to the product and the engineering team. So you will just learn something like gradually, but you don't have this kind of tension like coming from the startup. So I think like for my own experience, for me, if I was a junior designer early on, I wanted to go to a larger company because I think the huge benefit from working at larger company is I can get more chance to get and receive feedback from senior designer, design manager, and my stakeholder. We have more like we have a supportive like design community where it's very easy for me to get some design mentorship internally as well. So the other question is, I want to know about what was the most challenging behavior question and how you answered to it. I think it's really depending on the persons because sometimes they will ask the questions outside, like outside the behavior question, like typical behavior question, and how do you like such as how do you handle the conflict and how do you handle the disagreement. I cannot share the examples right now because sometimes the answer is very personal. But for the most challenging behavior questions, let me think about the one. So one time I was asked to the question where the hiring manager asked me like what uh what so what like who is the person have the most uh impact or influence on your design journey. I think that one is not very challenging, but it's a very new question I never have in my behavior question library, but it's also a good question for me to reflect on and talk about during during the interview. So I think like this question is really depending on like each person's, like how you think about the challenge might be a little bit different than myself. Yeah. So the other question is, um, for our UX portfolio as a game designer and developer, it is okay to have internal game and computer game that went through the UX design process. Yeah, definitely. I think for so no matter like what kind of like design works you have and you're trying to breaking into the UX design field, I think that when you are presenting your design process, design work during the portfolio presentation, it's always good for us to talk very clearly about the project background, which is like what is the user problem this internal game or this computer game are solving for, and what is the business goal we are trying to reach after we launch these internal games. And we always have the business problem as well as the user problems in the very beginning for each of the game design or each of the digital like app design. And then during the process, I always talk about like how I iterate based on the feedback I got from the user, based on the feedback I got from the internal stakeholder. Because when you are designing this game, I guess like you still have a lot of technical constraint or business constraint coming from your stakeholder. So trying to justify your design decision based on like this feedback, based on the user insight, is something like the hiring manager and the hiring team they are looking for. Uh, the other question is, what platform do you use to make your online portfolio? Also, which mentoring platform did I use? So the first question is I'm using the Squarespace to build up my online portfolio, and I know some of my friends they are using web flows which require more like the front end coding skill, and a lot of designers also using the Wix as a platform to build up their online portfolio. So yeah, so for me, like because I don't have any like coding background, and Squarespace have some like the standardized template, so I was just get using one of the template from the Squarespace. And for the mentorship platforms, I'm using like ADP list before to reach out to the designer, and I also using LinkedIn a lot to reach out to the designer. Yeah. And the last two questions, the first one is, it is okay to add a professional portfolio project where you didn't work on the entire process. Um, I think like I'm not quite understand this question, but I guess what you mean here is the professional project you are working on doesn't follow the entire like human-centered design process. So if that is correct, I think yes, because when we are working in this company, because of the time and resource constraints, not every project we will follow the entire like end-to-end like product design process. However, what you need to clarify and be more specific is about be more clear is about what is the user problem and business goal you're trying to solve, you're trying to reach. I think you should be very specific about like these two part. So you present it with the hiring manager and talk about the limitation, like why you like, because sometimes you didn't have the chance to do the user research, but the hiring manager they might ask you the question like why not doing the user research during the process. You need to have a rationale to answer this question, even though you are not working, you don't have a entire comprehensive design process. You can say something like because of the time constraint we need to launch it blah blah blah. So you always need to have a rationale. By not doing this or by doing this, you always have to have a rationale for your project. Yeah. And the last question is, so would you recommend applying for 20 jobs a day during the job searching? Um, so for me, like personally, I said that my goal is like 20 or 30 per day. And when I was applying for the job, even in the very beginning, I was a junior, but I didn't really care about like 3 or 4 years like work experience. They wrote down on the uh, job job poster. I just apply as many as possible to see that any of the like company, they will like give me an interview, so I will start interview process. So I think early on, like applying more job and get more exposure to the job interview is very helpful like for me to land my first job. Yeah, but right now, because I get more and more experience, I don't have to apply to tons of the job every day. And most of the time, like the recruiter or some of my connection, like we will have some like referral, or the recruiter will reach out to me directly to land a job, to start the interview process. Yeah. So yeah, I think I already answered most of the questions here. And thanks everyone to join this like presentation. I hope it's helpful for you to think
Thank
about your career and set up a goal for yourself.
For sure, this was a great session. There's a lot of comments there thanking you. This was a fantastic presentation, and thank you so much again. We really hope to have you again at the reactor. To the rest of the audience, if you have a few more minutes, I know we're running out of time here, but feel free to share your feedback on our survey link. I shared it in the chat. I'm going to try to put it up. Yeah, it's also on the screen. The event code is also on the screen. There you go. We always appreciate great feedback. And if you would like to hear different sorts of topic also. And we're also on social media, so you can reach out to us on Meetup. We're on Twitter. As I mentioned before, this session is being and has been recorded and will be available on demand on our YouTube channel. The link is in the chat. It's on the screen also. And yeah, that's about it. Minjun, thank you again so much. It was fantastic to have you.
Thank you so much, and hope to see all of you again in the future events. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.